Right, a wee bit different here this evening. I'm going to start off by playing something that I recorded yesterday, and then once it's done I'll come back for a wee bit and have a chat about that. So just bear with me a wee second here. Make sure I've got what I need here. Hello people, I can see. I'll be back once this video is done. So, this is to talk about the pull of gravity, the pull of magnetism, and how I have been stating over and over again that when it comes to physical reality, there is no such a force as pull. So many people have got questions and trouble with this. I've done this a few times, but I quite enjoy it because it obliterates some of the notions that people have about reality and how it functions. So what people first and foremost have to comprehend is that mainstream science, when it's talking about gravity, Einsteinian gravity, it's talking about space balls, you know. So the trouble that they have, I'll get to that. First and foremost, you've got this notion of gravity. Gravity on the macro level, dealing with planetoids and trying to come up with explanations for why planetoids, how they're affecting each other and how they orbit around each other and blah blah blah. So they've got this notion of attraction. So somehow, you know, we have to devise a theory or an imaginative fucking story about how one of these things is affecting another thing, right? Now, we could comprehend this in physical reality if there was an attachment to both, right? And that one of these objects or both had, like, you know, a winding mechanism that would allow them to be pushed towards each other by a process of, you know, some sort of winding mechanism, right? Again, I can only go on physical reality as a human being and what I have available to me to demonstrate, you know, and think about some of these claims. So as I say, I would either have to have an attachment at the back of the objects and some mechanism that would achieve the motion in order to bring these objects together, or again, you could just have the attachment at the front, makes no difference, and the same, you know, process would be happening where one would be pushed towards another one, right? Again, we have to clarify when we're saying words like push and pull, simply, you know, we've got an object here, so I pull the object towards me, I push the object away, pull, push, pull, push. What you notice is that the very same principle applies when it comes to motion. It's the mechanism we're looking for. So when I say I pulled it towards me, there's a pressure on the other side here where I have to press upon it to make it move, and the same here at this. Doesn't matter what direction I want it to go in, I have to apply a pressure to it. That's how we know, that's how we understand reality. We apply it. To me, it comes down to simple terminology, and I would call it leverage. Right? So any construction that we have, any, you know, machine that we invent or that we utilise, or any process of motion works knowing these things. So in science they'll say that has inertia. That just pretty much means that it's doing what it wants to do, and if it has a set amount of inertia, and if I go like that, you know, the same dimensions, the same thing, now it has double the inertia, which means that if I want to get it to move, I have to apply a certain amount of force. Now with double the inertia, I have to apply more of a force to get it to move. So inertia just means that it's doing what it wants to do. In this case, it's static, right? Now I'm going to go through a few things and I'm probably going to jump from one to the other. We'll get to magnetism. The other lovely notion that people have is, oh well, tug of war, you know, you have to pull on tug of war. Well, it's the same principles again, as I pointed out so many times before. In the case of tug of war, you have two oppositions. Both oppositions have to apply a pressure, so they have to press upon it. Now each side has to create a vector in the opposing directions. So the grip has to be attained here. And if you don't have what we call friction, something to grasp onto, and to now convert your force, your pressure, you now have to convert it in this direction and press upon the rope here to make it go the direction you want. And it's the same for the other side. Okay, you're applying the pressure, now you're converting the vector to go the direction towards you, and you create what's known as tug of war. Right? It's the same thing, it's pressure. Applied pressure makes things move. Okay? So again, you know, in the case of the space balls, that's the point I missed out. Right? Einsteinian gravity, the warping and bending of space-time, like, you know, this is somehow surrounded by a fabric that it's warping, and this is now falling into it and, you know, going around and around and around, right? It's total nonsense, right? But anyway, anyhow, that's in relation to planetoids, right? On a globular Earth, you own the planet and objects falling, right? That, you know, the Einsteinian fucking gravity nonsense has got nothing to do with being within the reference frame, right? So they've got this warping and bending of space-time that causes, you know, space balls to go around each other by attraction. Now, again, attraction and pull and suction and all these things are just words. It's the principles, it's the mechanisms of what create motion that is the most important thing. Now, I'll get the vacuum out in a minute and we'll go through that as well. But remember, we're not talking about us within the reference frame here. That's a whole other subject, right? Why things do what they do within the reference frame, right? I'll get to my own theories on that, right? And again, for me, it can tie into the whole thing that we call the universe, because in the most people's minds, they've got this conception of us, the Earth, other planetoids in an empty space, and there's objects all within an empty space all moving around each other. What if it's not the case? What if what we call the universe, when we look above the heavens, the stars, the sun, the moon, what if they're part of the very same construct that we stand upon? What if the whole thing is encased in one unit, and there's no such thing as outer space with separate bodies and voids between them, right? So other examples, you know, as I say, leverage. You know, here we've got what we call an inclined plane, right? Again, it's just light, it's just a lever. So, you know, again, the same principles are applied. We have to apply pressure, and because there's now a resistance and this plane is inclined, so it's helical, right? What we get is that, right? I'm sure many of you've seen it. The same again, doesn't matter what direction I want to go in, and I'm applying a pressure and I'm pushing the direction I want. If I want to go the opposite direction, I have to do the same thing again, right? So we'll get to magnets in a second. I'm going to plug the Hoover in for you, because this is another thing that people have got the notion of. And the reason I'm showing you this is because of my thoughts on magnetism, right? So here we go. I'll put a wee pile of dust there. Emma is going to love me for clogging up her Hoover with this. So we've got a device here. The device here utilises electricity. Again, another discussion. We don't have a clue what electricity is, where it actually comes from, but we can utilise it to power motors. Now, a motor is just another system of leverage. Okay, same principles. Something has to press on something else to create what we call motion. So in this case, we get a high velocity rotation. Now, when that happens, you create a low pressure around that area. Okay, and from there, what happens is the higher pressure surrounding it pushes in, and this is what happens here. Do people actually think that this has some sort of magical power to make this stuff come inside here? What would you think, again this is in relation to the magnetism and gravity, how would you think that this has any sort of power, any sort of mechanism to make matter go towards it, right? We understand the principles of this. So in people's minds they think maybe this thing has some sort of magical power where it can reach out and grab onto stuff and bring it inwards, like I was showing you with the rope scenario. You know, we have to have something attached, right? So that when we tug on it, we get the action of motion, right? And in this case, would you be imagining there's like invisible ropes coming from inside the hoover to bring the objects inwards, right? No, what's happening is that there's a higher pressure here, there's an air pressure, and when this spins it creates a lower pressure system, a lower pressure area, and the higher pressure surrounding it rushes in and takes whatever it is in the vicinity with it. That's how it functions, right? Bringing me on to magnetism. Now I've got two magnets and I'm probably going to insert a bateric Lathway in here.
Now suppose we could sit at one place over the machine, such as in that little square, and watch the field lines go by. Notice the direction of the arrows. At the moment the field is to the left. Now it's upwards, to the right, downwards, left, up, right, down. So it's left, up, right, down. And the rotation, you see, is clockwise, which is to say rolling backwards. So the whole machine behaves like a mechanical rack and pinion, in which this is the field and this is the rotor. And here is the action. Well, of course, mechanical things are easy to understand. When we make it magnetic, it's a little less obvious, but we put in a row of horseshoe magnets, and the action, as you see, is very similar indeed. This, then, we call a rack and pinion motor. Now, in a linear motor, a row of electromagnets effectively replaces the row of permanent magnets, and instead of the many-toothed wheel, I'm going to use a very simple wheel with just two teeth. When I switch on the motor, the wheel spins, and if I disconnect one of the wires to this motor, I can stop this travelling field dead, like that, and now we can see the shape of it. There is the field shape. If I draw the wheel slowly along the surface, you can see the rack and pinion action in slow motion in the stationary field. Now if I
see that? No contact. Right? So we seem to have, when you see magnetism depicted, we've got this kind of flow going on, right? Where some form of flow is being created, and I utilised the vacuum hoover because for me, my mind goes to these realms. This is the similar principles, that when we're looking at magnets, something similar has to be going on, right? Or again, you know, when the magnets come together, right? Again, it's just like the vacuum hoover analogy. What do you imagine's happening? Do you imagine that this one has like little, you know, fishing lines that it casts out and latch on and then winds this in towards it, right? Or is there some form of, you know, pressure mediation going on? People have postulated through years of a thing called the ether, some fabric, some invisible fabric that's there that supports the whole of reality, every bit of matter, It's the foundation of physical reality. You know, people call it God, people can call it whatever they like, right? My questions are, you know, what is actually going on? Now, globular earth proponents want you to imagine, again, every physical example I can demonstrate to you in actual reality of motion and acceleration and how it's achieved works on the principles of leverage, pressure variance, something presses on something else, or I decrease the pressure in a particular medium and the higher pressure within the medium pushes in to fill the void. Because nature abhors a vacuum. You cannot create a space of no thing within the natural world. It doesn't exist. And if you try to, you just keep getting the, you know, the pressure surrounding trying to push in to fill that void. So what are we imagining now? There's these invisible type fishing lines that wind in and bring it towards, or as some people have postulated, a kind of zero pressure point is being created when it comes to magnets. And whatever the ether is, like, you know, I showed you with air, we can show the same in water. You know, if I puncture a hole here, we get the pressure in here pushing towards that lower pressure system, that lower pressure area. So I would postulate the very same thing is happening with magnets. We can't just, you know, I can't reason my way to imagining invisible nonsense, or as I've seen that they imagine there's, you know, this somehow fires out little balls that bounce off of this one and that somehow translates to this one coming towards that one. I mean, how fucking ridiculous is that? You know, that's like me saying, well, if I keep hitting that, it's going to come towards me. I mean, don't be fucking ridiculous. Again, people laugh at these things, people overlook them. And why I make such a big deal about it is because gravity is invoked as a cause of acceleration and motion. They say things are pulled towards the earth, right? So your only option then is that you get invisible cords coming from the earth centre that somehow reach out and latch onto objects, and then by some invisible cog winding mechanism winds stuff in towards it. It's fucking preposterous. Totally preposterous. Now, when I do this, you can see this sort of influence, like it's been bumped by something. Like the flow that's coming out of this one, and I'm going to cut in with a bit of Eric Laithwaite video here when he shows you the rack and pinion. I've already done that. Too early. So, I've inserted that. You've seen what I'm talking about. The very same principles apply for me here. You know, it's pretty similar. The rack and pinion in you know, physical manual terms is like this. If I hold that and I spin the rod, right, you see what's happening, right? Same if I go in the opposite direction. So, when we talk about magnetism, I base my comprehension on what reality is and how it actually functions. I don't wander into imagination land and voodoo black magic stuff. Ooh, come towards me by power of mathematics. Ooh, fucking gibberish. Now I challenge anybody, demonstrate for me the mechanism of a pulling force. How's that going to happen? Doesn't happen. Right? So, what else can I say about this? You know, flat earthers, right, have this issue of, you know, the directional vector that we have, which is straight down, right? You got a plumb line. I've got one somewhere. Where is it? Let me see. Where did I put my plumb line? It's hanging here somewhere. It's there, it's in the packet. I've not opened that yet. We'll use this. Right, so we've got a plumb. Right, now the downward vector, these are considered as parallel lines regardless of where I go on the earth. Right, and again, we utilise this in construction where we have the plumb and we have the level, so that the level is always 90 degrees to the plumb and vice versa. Now every downward plumb is a parallel to the next, right? And level is level, always at 90 degrees to the plumb, right? So we have this downward vector, and I'm holding this and I let it go, and we get this phenomena that we call falling. The globe earthers like to extrapolate upon falling as an explanation to, you know, try and bamboozle you into believing that bodies of water can wrap and bend around objects. Now remember what I says to you, the theories and notions of gravity are based on planetoids. Nothing to do with, you know, what's going on within the reference frame or upon the reference frame. Right? So they've got a real issue about how water's going to wrap and bend around the object. Right? And I've even seen some of these morons utilising centrifugal effect. Now, again, centrifugal is an effect, it's not a force. Right? The force, like, if I sit like that, like this, right, and I push the water bottle like that, or I spin the water bottle, right, like this, right, you get this outward push of pressure, right, but the motion was created by a force, which is the applied pressure in whatever particular direction, right. So, you know, as I say, when that happens and we get these things happening, when I put that into motion and I was to keep pushing it into motion like that, right, a higher pressure starts to happen towards the back, right. Now the air bubble that's trapped in there is going to be pushed to the front, okay, because it's got less density. So the densest part, the most pressure is going to be towards the point of the force that's being applied, right? In this case here, or if I go here, now it's going to shift. Now the pressure is going to shift towards the back because it's relative to motion, right? Okay. Same again, if I go like this and I swing it backwards and forwards, right? What's going to happen eventually is that the water just pushes here and the air bubble comes. So it doesn't matter if I'm going rotationally or if I'm going in uniform straight lines, we get the very same effect happening, right? So I've seen globe earthers, that whistle guy, whatever his name is, the older gentleman, trying to utilise centrifugal effect as in comparison to how gravity would function. Now again, they've got a fucking serious issue, and I don't know what's wrong with their mind. They're talking about centrifugal. When we talk about centrifugal, when you do that and you rotate something, there's an outward flow, right? A pseudo force, an effect. Everybody's experienced this. You stand on the merry-go-round and you feel a push outwards, right? They're not utilising this to try and talk about how things are attracted. It's fucking ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. You can't use centrifugal as in the same breath as gravity. Boom. Because when you spin something, it goes away from it. So, where does that leave me? Right? When I'm trying to come up with an understanding or a possible explanation to how my reality actually functions. So going back to, again, and for me, motion is always the most important thing, right? So what you have to imagine is that we have a void, we have nothing, right? And we have an object, right? We'll call it the earth, right? And there's other things here, there's air, there's water, there's whatever else. Now this object in three-dimensional space with nothing else to reference, right, has no direction, has no downward vectors, has no vectors whatsoever, because it's just an object. The only thing that gives it a vector is by putting it into motion, right? Now it has a vector. Now if you were standing here, or there was people here and this was put into motion, right? Now you've got a vector, now you have the downward vector, which is the opposite and equal to the upward vector, right? And they even talk about this stuff in mainstream, right? Where they'll tell you that the earth pushes upwards equally to you pushing down upon it. But something has to be moving in the first place. This is where people are missing the whole fucking point. For me, you know, it makes sense that the reference, again, this is only me going through my reasoning and looking at reality, and I invite you to do the same. If you can find something else to show me and influence the way I'm thinking about it, then fair enough. So far I have found nothing, right? So we get the vector being created by putting the system into motion, right? Well, now what happens is that you've got what we would call weight. If you were a body here before this was in motion and I just sat you there, you'd be static, you wouldn't be going anywhere. You'd just be hovering, and so would this, right? Now this object has set volume, it has a set shape to it, it has a set density to it, and so does this, right? But this has no weight and it has no direction. What gives it weight and what gives it direction is dependent upon the reference frame coming into contact with it, now pushing against it, giving it the downward vector, and depending on how fast it's moving is going to dictate the weight of the object, right? That's what weight is, right? For me, there's no other way that I can reason. And again, I encourage you and I invite you to get involved in the same thing and play with reality. See if you can find something, right? There's no pulling forces, they don't exist. When we're talking about centrifugal, we're talking about effects, we're not talking about forces. Centrifugal is an effect of motion, right? Motion requires force. Something has to press upon something else in order to make it move, right? And again, you've got these dipshits that want to invoke magnets and say, well, there is attraction and pull because the two magnets came together, just like that. Well, that's just akin to saying that the motor and the vacuum hoover attracted stuff towards it. It's fucking ridiculous. So where do they get the reasoning for that? I'll tell you where they get it, out their buttocks, right? They just imagine it. Because everybody's hell-bent on keeping this three-dimensional space ball fantasy alive. And this is why they're getting stuck. This is why physics and mathematical physics, it gets stuck and goes into imaginative fairyland of invisible unicorns and fucking leprechaun farts. It doesn't mean anything. Because they won't let go of the fucking ball earth. Right? So again, same principles with a ball earth. What's the problem here? Well, you get people here and you get people here, you're spinning it, right, and it's moving like this. I mean, centrifugal is going to throw everything off, right? And again, if you use my principle of linear, uniform, straight line motion, well, there's a problem here, because how are you going to get stuff here to stay on the ball if you're putting it into motion? It's not going to work. It would only work up here, and then here things would start sliding off. This is reality. This is how it works. I'm going to keep going over this stuff. And again, I invite people. I'm not interested. No, you just don't understand. I've gave you demonstrations. Don't dare coming back at me with notions of pull. Right? I've demonstrated it to you with a tug-of-war scenario. What else are you going to come up with? Huh? There's nothing. No such thing as pull. Doesn't exist. So the magnetism thing, as I say, I showed you the Eric Laithwaite stuff. What's going on? Something's pushing them together. What is it that's pushing them together? Because they certainly ain't being attracted with invisible fucking ping pong balls firing out and bouncing off, because when you do that, stuff goes further away. I would suggest that whatever's going on with a magnet, some sort of lower pressure regions being created, just like water, just like air, and whatever's surrounding rushes in and takes whatever it can with it to fill the void. That's my thinking on the subject, and don't let anybody tell you that they know for a fact what's going on with magnets, because they don't. It's an invisible world. Or we can put iron filings and we can see these shapes. All you're seeing is lines. Lines of what? What is it you're seeing? Huh? And what we see is a particular direction of flow. So again, that backs up exactly what I'm saying. You know, when you can influence. Yeah, pushed it away there. I'll leave it up to you. I don't know whether I'll just upload this or I may go live and show this, so I may be talking after this. If no, I'm going to leave it with you, right? So, you know, people talking about spinning, centrifugal, and this is the other one, you know, centripetal force. Centripetal is basically tension, right? So if I attach that and I swung it, right, and I was rotating it, right, there's a tension here, and now I'm having to tether, right? So you get a tension within that where it keeps it tethered, and there's a tension as that wants to go in a straight line away, right? They call this centripetal. It's nothing, it's tension, right? It's not even really an effect, it's tension, right? So again, you know, when I was talking about the reference frame thing and the uniform straight line motion, so you've seen the bucket thing as well. You know, if you've got a bucket and you put water in there and you swing the bucket, right? Right? You get everything pushing towards the base of the bucket, pushing towards the base of the bucket, right? Now I've got issues with that, you know, because it doesn't really seem to affect air so much. And again, with the postulation of the uniform straight line motion of the Earth system, whatever it may be, you know, when we get this motion, from there you can get density layering. I've showed this example before in the car. I showed it with the water, right? So that when we accelerate in that direction, if I had different materials in here, things of different density, right, what's going to happen is that the most dense is going to go towards the back, towards the point of the motion or the cause of the motion, right? And then I'm going to get a separation in the different densities. So you can see this example, I've done it before. You can use a vehicle where you can hang plumb lines of different materials and you can have a helium balloon attached to the floor. Now when the car's accelerated in a particular direction, the denser materials go towards the back, the helium balloon is now pushed forward because the air within the system is now compressing, creating a higher density, which is now forcing the helium balloon, which is a less dense, you know, gas, to go forward. Right? So that happens with uniform, linear, straight line motion. Why is everybody so fucking terrified to go there? Huh? Because propaganda said so. You never listen to propaganda. You should be reasoning yourself. You should be looking at these things and trying to tear them apart. Which is why I was saying the other night, when a globe earther wants to invoke gravity, you first have to establish with them what they're talking about. Are you talking about planetoid gravity, warping and bending of non-second space-time stuff, non-entities warping and bending, creating this nonsense? Or are you talking about gravity as in us within the reference frame and the appearance of things falling? Now what if that's not the case? What if when I let that go it stays perfectly fucking still and it's us that are coming up to meet it? Yeah? There's the question answered. If you don't, and you keep going with globe earth nonsense and static earths and stuff, you're having to come up with all sorts of magical, you know, voodoo, black magic nonsense to try and explain what makes that go in a downwards vector. Why does it have to be that complicated? All I'm saying is that it should be open to the discussion, and hoping that other people get involved in that discussion and not being afraid to, because flat earthers said that flat earth society said so. So flat earth society's government agents, so I'm not listening to them. Never mind propagandists. Go through the processes that I'm showing you right now. Anyhow, no doubt I will be discussing this further, and I encourage and hope that anybody else can get involved. And again, I'm not interested in trolls. You don't have a leg to stand on. There's no such thing as a pulling force. Pull and push are descriptors of direction. I pulled it towards me, I pushed it away. I pulled it towards, I pushed it away. Mechanism for the motion is the exact same. It's applied pressure. Right? Or in the case of the vacuum cleaner, you know, pressure mediation. I'm creating a lower pressure within the medium air. And the higher pressure air pushes in to fill the void. So, let me see. We get any discussions on it? Exactly, Imran. This is what people are missing. Same with the globe earth troll the other night, you know, talking about inserting things up his bum and going to hospital and asking them if they would remove it. The language that you would use would be, can you pull it out? But it's only a descriptor of the direction of the motion. In order to achieve that motion, there has to be applied pressure. Push. Dr. John D, I certainly have not. I'm going to have to get into that. So difficult when, you know, you've got time, you know, constraint issues and trying to remember stuff, and as time passes on your mind wanders to other things. I'm sure you can relate to that, but I really should get to it. If you don't mind and you can be bothered, could you send me an email linking me direct to them so that I don't have to go searching for it? All the forces demonstrated started with muscle contraction at pull, none never. Again, this is the nonsense that I just displayed for you. Do you think that the tubes within the muscle structure, if you look at it, you know, it's actually a lever system of a hollow tube and another tube inside it, and there's levers that are coming from it and pushing, you know, in a particular direction, either to contract the muscle or to expand the muscle. Again, you have to go to voodoo black magic when you try and invoke pull. It's nonsense. There has to be contact of something against something else in order to achieve motion. I mean, you're just, these people must be desperately trying. I'll tell you, there is people that are desperately trying to cling to this notion of pull because they know how detrimental it is to their idiotic worldview and gravity and all this gibberish, right? You're never going to escape factual reality and how things actually function here, right? If I remove your lung from your rib cage and it's no longer attached, where it has something to push against to expand, you're going to die. That's what happens to people. Their lungs collapse. I know people that their lung has detached from the rib cage and now they can't breathe the air in, because the muscles, the fibres have to have something to push against in order to expand, to let the air pressure come in. Stop being willfully ignorant and desperate to cling to a bias. You're not going to break reality so that you can maintain an idiotic belief in magical nonsense. Tommy T, there's ringing at this push-pull discussion that seems irrelevant to me. How is it irrelevant, Tommy T? It's only irrelevant because you probably don't want it to be true. It's a shame. It's a wee shame for you. Exactly, Crystal Bernardo. Any example that you of something in motion or acceleration, I guarantee you it will be an applied pressure that's going on. It's the whole basis of machinery. One man's detector. That we call G-force is a good example of how an example of what gravity could be has been in front of us all along. Well, G-force again is you know, exactly that. If you're in an accelerating body, then you feel the pressure. You can feel the increase in pressure. Your weight increases. You know, if you are sat on a, you know, one of these rotational, you know, devices that they have for fighter pilots and whatever else, if you had a pressure plate at the back, as that starts to rotate, that person's weight is going to increase massively. This is what I'm saying. You know, we can look at motion and it gives us the answer to a lot of these things. Density layering, what weight is, how we get weight, and how weight's variable depending on the speed of the reference frame. Now this is staying up, Des. Well, Tommy T, this is the problem, because, you know, there's always new people and people forget things, and sometimes people don't grasp what's being presented to them. So we have to have the repetition. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. I suggest you just go and watch something else instead of bitching and whining and moaning. You know, how narcissistic are you that you come here to another content creator and start demanding and wanting an influence on what they should be presenting? Take a look at yourself. Mind your own fucking business. And if it's no for you, charge on and away and watch something else. Right? Another perfect example of weak psychology and how blinded people are to their own fucking stupidity. Any questions? Any examples that anybody wants to offer that contradict what I was presenting here? This is the time for it. What's this? What happened to your last one? I removed it. I wasn't happy with how I conveyed this. You know, I don't want to convey the message the way that I did, and I just wasn't happy with it. So I stated that when I was on live, that I probably would be taking it off. What doesn't stick, V Thomas? What are we talking about here? We've got the globe troll triggered. Globe trolls are triggered massively because they hate reality and they hate it when it's pointed out to other people. Hello, Flatzoid. No, this is it, one man, he's detector. You know, everybody, a lot of flat earthers have got a, you know, avoid this type of discussion. They'd rather opt for looking at electricity or magnetism or some other, you know, notion of what the possibility could be. As I say, I'm putting that on the table because it's demonstrable and it answers questions. Exactly. This is, if anybody looks at, Einstein's equivalence principle, this is exactly what he was stating. That to us within the reference frame, there would be no difference, there would be no way to tell the difference in whether we were in a reference frame that was moving uniformly or whether we're in some gravitational field, right? The gravitational fields and all this stuff are mathematical concepts, right? Only one of the postulations in Einstein's equivalence principle are demonstrable, and the demonstrable aspects are the ones I've just showed you. Motion and uniform motion can demonstrate to you how we can have the creation of vectors, how we create density layers and have directionality, right, the vector. And also how we can, explain weight, and how we can have this, what we call, the globies love it. Oh, well, there's a pressure gradient. Of course there is. Like if you were in a car accelerating the car, there would be a higher pressure towards the rear of the vehicle than there would be towards the front. And if you invert that 90 degrees, that's exactly what's happening. You're getting a compression of air closer to the earth, right? And the further up you go, there's less dense material, so less pressure. No, it doesn't mean that there's nothing up there, it just means that it's under different pressure. I would suggest because of the motion. I mean, all I'm saying is I don't know why more people don't invite that into the discussion. It's not based on the Flat Earth Society said so. It's based on reasoning with your objective reality and what we can demonstrate to each other. So I'm not interested in Flat Earth Society stuff. I don't give a fuck about all that scare tactics and fear mongering and propaganda. Reason with me, the man, based on what we can observe and test and demonstrate in actual reality. I've just spoke about that, Luca Greer. Barometric pressure, that's, I've gave the example of this using water. When you go into a swimming pool, and you've been to a deep swimming pool, when you're at the surface of that swimming pool, right, there's a surrounding pressure on you, okay? As you dive down further and further, there's more stuff above you, right, which is creating a higher pressure the deeper you go, and you can feel that. It's the same with the air. As you go upwards, there's less pressure, there's less dense material there. Exactly. Well, that's the only thing that we have. That's how a force is for me. A force is something that presses upon something else. Dr. John D. I know that you comprehend. I'm not preaching to the choir. I'm just, extrapolating on the point that's being made. That's what a force is. That's why I'm saying, people talking about centrifugal forces, they're effects of motion. Like the roundabout as a child that you went on and you feel that outward push. Right? You had to use force to put it into motion. You had to put your feet on the ground and apply the very same principles that I've just displayed for you in order to put it into a rotation. And the faster you go, the more you feel that outward push. Right? That's the effect of the motion. It's not a force. The support pressure accelerates. Don't know what you mean by that. I mean, if any of you guys want to get involved in this discussion, by all means come and join me right now. As I always say, I'm not invested in any bias. If people can, offer specifics and explain and demonstrate how they're thinking and what their reasoning is and how they maybe think I'm wrong, bring it. Because I don't want to be wrong. this is the thing, Troll Hunter, as I was talking about in that video. This is because of the globe earth paradigm and this notion that the universe is an empty void, and in this empty void there's separate objects, right, with a void between them. What I'm saying is, what if that's not the case? What if the things that we call the universe, the stars, these luminaries, what if they're attached and part of our earth structure? These are things that we don't know. I get that, Flatzoid, but you know, it's how we get the density layers in the first place and why they're orientated in a particular direction. There has to be a cause for that. We can argue about what happens with density and density disequilibrium and relative density and stuff like that when the reference frame is already established. But how do we get the reference frame in that situation in the first place? This is the problem, as far as I can tell. Good, Flatzoid, so that's what I'm talking about.
We're discussing this further, and I encourage and hope that anybody else can get involved. And again, I'm not interested in trolls. You don't have a leg to stand on. There's no such thing as a pulling force.
But this is just a fucking absolute gimpy little moron. I mean, how fucking utterly stupid is this boy, Sean Hawkins? Absolutely blindly fucking dumb. And the same for any other globe earther or anybody else that tries to deny the facts of reality. Demonstrate the mechanism of a pulling force. Stop just saying it. It's been explained to you. Pull and push are descriptors of direction, not mechanisms of motion and acceleration. That's how. Get off the fucking crack pipe and actually comprehend and listen to what's being said to you. Fucking gimpy cretinous morons. No time for you. Fuck off. From now on, you shall be ignored, because that's all you deserve. Until you show some sensibility and the ability to reason properly and, you know, articulate with specifics the point you're trying to make. Just calling people names isn't going to cut it. Sorry. Fucking ball bag. Would you get density layers if the temperature was below the freezing point of everything substance? Well, this is a thing, innit? I mean, you know, temperature and pressure seem to be relatable, but I don't really know. I'm trying to, you know, and picture what you're talking about. Would you get density layers if the temperature was below the freezing point of every substance? I don't know. You would be changing medium then. Let's have the discussion about these things, and we can articulate the points, and then it's beneficial for other people who are maybe paying attention to it. Could be a valid point, but I'm no. If every substance was a solid, would you have density layers? Well, no, because they would resist each other. We're talking primarily on fluids, liquids, that we can get that in, you know, solid-bodied objects within these mediums. But if it was just solid bodies, then, you know, there's going to be that resistance. So, like if I had a block of wood, you know, beneath a bit of metal, and you know,
put it into motion in the system that I'm talking about, you would just get that resistance. Obviously the solid can't pass through the wood, but if I put it into a fast enough, you know, motion, eventually that pressure, that weight would crush and, you know, compress the less dense material. Seven alien. The weather is a prime example of pressure and its influence on our environment. Why is one day hot and the other sun 93 million miles away? Nonsense, of course. Of course, for me that's related to you know, pressure. And again, you know, the globe Earth talks about this, you know, like the gobstopper, you know, like the centre, this molten centre. Well, again, if you're under extreme pressure at a certain point, you're going to get extreme heat, extreme temperature. We see that in motion as well, you know. So my main focus is, you know, how the reference frame would be established. That's where my mind goes. You know what's going on in relationship to the things. How do we even establish that kind of reference frame for us as human beings trying to conceive of the bigger picture? Again, this is what I keep saying, the only thing I can come to is motion. And I was talking to Andrew, and even from a religious point of view, again, I'm not religious, but I find it interesting that the very first statements from, you know, like the biblical is that and God moved, or something like that, basically saying put things into motion before he spoke or any of that stuff. I just don't think we would even exist. You know, it could be that we are static representations of something and God is actually moving through us, and that's what animates. I mean, I don't know. These are just theories, ideas about the possibilities of what's going on. But from my point of view, again, basing things on, you know, objective reality and demonstration, that's where I'm at, and I just can't get beyond it until somebody can offer me something that shows me otherwise. And again, some of the main points to help people with the globe earth argumentation, right? The way in which objects fall, right? That observation, that phenomena has got nothing to do with establishing the earth's shape. It's a total fucking red herring. And people have to, you know, comprehend the difference between the Einsteinian and Newtonian. Right? Einsteinian's in relation to planetoids and how they're affecting each other. It's got nothing to do with us within the reference frame and that phenomena that we observe. I would need to get the exact quote from Andrew. Again, I'm not a biblical religious person. I don't know. Moved upon the face of the waters. Yeah. So I'm open to discussion. If anybody wants to come in here for a little bit and chat about this stuff, then by all means.
Andrew, cheers for that link and your other video. I'll show that for the next time that we get involved with this discussion. So, do people comprehend what was presented? Hopefully it opens up and other people engage in the discussion. I'm here for anybody that wants to get involved in that discussion. I say, I'm not claiming that any of this is set in stone and that I'm correct and I have the answers. I'm just saying where I reason to and why I reason the way I do and what it's based upon. That's it. FPV Angel, you've heard it before, and as I see, there's other people here that have heard this before, but this rages on, this battle, and new people arrive. People have not heard this before. They're still getting stuck in these, never-ending debates and arguments. First and foremost, the gravity discussion's a separate entity to the shape of the Earth, regardless of how much kicking and screaming these morons want to do, right? But they always hoodwink people into discussing that. As we've seen with the Atwood thing, the very first topic was gravity. We're asking the shape of the Earth. We're not talking about the phenomena of falling objects or apparently falling objects. Yeah, but how was that reference? How was the reference frame established in that format, Dr. John D? Why is it orientated top to bottom? That's the point. So of course, if the reference frame is in motion, then I have to apply energy. I have to do work to overcome it, which is why as a child, I'm postulating here, you're lying on your back and you have to develop the skeletal and muscle structure to be able to overcome that centrifugal effect, that push downwards, so that you can combat it, and then you're using energy. And then you can pick another object up and use energy to take it out of its position, and you let it go and it goes back. What's the cause of that? What's the mechanism that's making it go back? If something's moving and something, accelerates or whatever, then the object's either accelerating or it's the reference frame that's moving. So what causes it? And when we keep going over these same points, it gets me a wee bit annoyed. Right? I grasp all that stuff, this equilibrium, I've taken it out of its position and I let it go and it goes back. Well, what's the mechanisms that's making it happen? How did the reference frame establish these physical laws in the first place? What would be the cause of that? I think too many people get stuck within the reference frame instead of thinking, well, how does the reference frame act? How would you actually formulate the reference frame in that structure in the first place? Anyhow, I'm going to get off. Nobody's asking to join. A lot of people have got things to say, but nobody wants to discuss it. Hopefully in the future, people will want to come and have the discussion about it. Take it easy, people.